Hey, Husker fans, welcome to another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast with Chris Peterson and Danny Gillette. As always, go Big Red. Good morning, Husker fans, and welcome back to the Husker Big Red YouTube channel. My name's Chris Peterson, and joining me, as always, is Danny Gillette. And we're back here on this Monday morning for another episode of the Husker Big Red podcast. It was an exciting weekend for the Huskers. They are inched closer to an NCAA tournament berth. The Nebraska baseball team took a step forward, and it was a great weekend overall. How you doing this morning, Danny?
Good. This coming weekend is when daylight savings begins, so I'm happy about that. A little warmer weather up here, and a lot of exciting Husker sports to watch over the weekend. So things are trending up in all areas.
Yeah, lots happening in the Nebraska world. Let's get to it, I guess. Before we do, though, if you haven't already, please make sure to hit the like button and subscribe, and do us a huge favor. Help us find more hardcore Husker fans. That's what this podcast and what our website is about, the hardcore Husker fans out there. At any rate, on Sunday, it was a great day for Husker fans, at least Nebraska basketball fans, as Nebraska took on Rutgers at home. It was kind of an ugly game, which it always is with Rutgers. They're a tough defensive team, but the Nebraska defense was really up to par. They won the rebounding battle. They gave up a few too many offensive rebounds, but won the rebounding battle overall. The defense was spectacular. Casey had 18 points, including the 4-point play, which was kind of a great cap to his career. Kevin McHale was there. They got their 21st win of the season, win number 11 in the Big Ten. So, Danny, here's the big question: do you think that Nebraska clinched an NCAA tournament berth last night?
Yeah, and I thought they did enough last week. I honestly thought, Minnesota last weekend was when they clinched an NCAA tournament berth, but any win helps, and I think they definitely did. If it was in question at the beginning of the week, it was no longer in question by the end of Sunday.
Yeah, I agree. I do think that they helped themselves a lot with that 4-game win streak, which ended with the Minnesota victory, winning all those games by double digits. But another double-digit win against a Rutgers team that has been playing better, could have a chance to be in the NIT, actually. I just thought, it avoided kind of a 4-game losing streak. That was the only way I was really worried about Nebraska, is if they lost the last 3 in the regular season and in the Big Ten tournament. So that's not going to happen now. They do have one more road game against Michigan, which has struggled, mightily. They lost by 23 to Ohio State. Again, they've lost in their last 7 road games now, or actually, no, 8 road games. They've lost by at least 20 points. They have been better at home, so we'll see. They did beat Wisconsin there a couple weeks ago. They beat Ohio State there. But Nebraska should take care of business there, and it's really important that they do. That's their last regular season game, and if they win that game, they will get a double bye into the Big Ten quarterfinals, which will be another first in Nebraska basketball history. That's something they've never done before.
Yeah, that would be quite impressive. And after this long stretch of games, you would think that a double bye is almost needed. And I think it would be really beneficial for them to get that double bye, get some rest. I think this is a very Big Ten tournament ready team and NCAA tournament ready team. So I'm excited to see what they do. In this tournament. And I think the tournament overall should be exciting because, as we've seen this season, anybody can beat anybody on any given night. So I'm excited for the tournament itself, and hopefully Nebraska can win a couple of games in the tournament.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how the bracket plays out. I mean, Nebraska hasn't won a a tournament championship in conference basketball since 1994, I want to say. So it's been a very long time since the Huskers have done that. I believe they beat like Oklahoma State in the Big 12 or the Big 8 championship. Excuse me, it was before even the Big 12. And so it would be a huge step forward. I mean, you only have to win 3 games as opposed to winning 4. And obviously teams like Michigan will be on the first day would have to win 5 in a row. But overall, I do feel very good about this team. It was interesting. They saw Kevin McHale was in attendance last night. Of course, he coached Fred Hoiberg. They both spent time with the Timberwolves, I believe it was. And he talked to the team after the game, and he kind of conveyed how impressed he was with their defense and their tenacity. And he said they would be a tough out this postseason, and I tend to agree with him. I mean, for a team that doesn't have a true point guard, I think there's a lot of things to like about Nebraska going into the postseason.
Yeah, it was fun. It was really fun to see Kevin McHale up here in Boston. He's obviously a legend, and I used to grow up watching highlights. My dad was a big Kevin McHale fan, so it was fun to see that come full circle. And Kevin McHale knows basketball. He plays their defense. And I think that tenacity that McHale played with, the Huskers have shown over this last stretch here. So it was really cool to see McHale in the locker room. And, it just goes to show that, people are paying attention to this program. And this program is on the upswing. And, we talk a lot about, transfer portal misses and blah, blah, blah. But Fred Hoiberg has done very well with the transfer portal, and he's had a lot of hits. And so I think this program is in good standing moving forward, and people are starting to take notice. I mean, you heard the praise John Beline gave the program last weekend, and now Kevin McHale is noticing what they're doing, and it's really kind of cool considering where the program was just 2 years ago when they struggled to even, reach the double-digit win mark, and now they're hopefully off and running to the NCAA tournament and hopefully a long run in the Big Ten tournament.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, people are taking notice of this team, and Fred has done a great job, building it. And like Rink Mast, Bryce Williams, Juwan Gary. I mean, CJ Wilcher could come back next year if he wanted to. Doesn't seem like he's going to. But if Fred can keep these guys together, for the most part, I think this team could be really good again next year. So it's going to be interesting to see how that offseason plays out. But with the way that Nebraska does NIL, and it's not. I love these guys, but I don't think Rink Mast or maybe Juwan Gary has maybe a future in the NBA potentially, but I don't think that Rink Mast does. I think they all play professional basketball probably in Europe somewhere, which you can make a great career out of. I think Derek Walker's working on that right now. Sam Griesel as well.
I think Bryce Williams might have a future in the NBA too, honestly, because of his mid-range game a little bit.
Yeah, potentially he could have a shot too. Those guys have more of the length and they kind of fit more into the modern kind of NBA game. But there's a lot of really nice pieces. Like I said, even though they don't have like a true point guard, they do have Tominaga, Hoiberg who will be back next year. Jamarcus Lawrence will be back next year. So they do have some really good ball handler type guys that in terms of March Madness, which you need those guys to be successful. And Sam Hoiberg's been spectacular on defense. Jamarcus Lawrence has been great both ways since he's kind of shifted over to the bench. So there's a lot of things to feel good about. I do think it would be nice if they could, get on a little bit of a run, because I still are at this point, while I feel that they're in the tournament, I don't think they're going to be higher than, maybe a 9 or 10 seed at this point. Is if they want to get, you maybe up to that 7 range, they're probably going to have to make like the Big Ten championship game or something. And that might not even be enough.
Yeah, and I think it's still okay, even if they're a 9 or 10 seed. I mean, higher seed doesn't automatically guarantee victory, and it's all about the matchup and who they get. And I was even thinking, you mentioned players coming back and trying to keep the same team together. I mean, Fred has built like 4 different teams during his tenure here, so he's shown he can build. And I think the difference between his builds in his first couple of years versus these last 2 is that he's found more players that are suited for Big Ten play, and he's changed up his style, which is very hard to do as a coach.
Yeah, and they're playing a lot better defense. I mean, in that you mentioned John Beilein, his teams, he struggled at Michigan at times too until he hired an assistant coach and the defense really took off to the next level. And they really did a good job on defense last night. They allowed Rutgers only 4 3-pointers. Rutgers made 11 the first time around. So that I thought was the difference in the game. And basically, I mean, the turnovers were a bit of an issue, but they outscored Rutgers by 16 points at the 3-point line, or 15 points at the 3-point line, and that was the margin of victory. So really, I mean, for Nebraska, if they make more threes than their opponent, and they win the rebounding battle, they're probably going to win the game. It's not, this game isn't that complicated, and that's what I love about Fred Hoiberg is he knows how to win. He's proven he can win. He did at Iowa State. He did Nebraska. The NBA was, he had some success with the Bulls, but he just never had the roster that he needed to win. And here, I just think, as far as Big Ten coaches, Nebraska's pretty lucky where they're sitting right now with Fred Hoiberg. And Trev Alberts needs to lock him up long term. And I think we could see a sustained run of NCAA tournament bursts, starting this year and continue over the next, 5 or 10 years. So it could be another, golden era for I shouldn't say another one. This could be the golden era for Nebraska basketball. I mean, the Danny Nee, years in the 80s and 90s were great, and those probably were the golden years, but they still didn't win an NCAA tournament game. And I think Fred Hoiberg's going to be the guy to finally end that drought for Nebraska basketball.
I agree, and he's shown that no matter what happens on the court, he's going to stick with his system and what he believes in, and I think it's working. And yet, even if he sticks to his system, he's shown that he's been able to adapt with post players and point guards and things like that, and from getting Derek Walker to getting Rink Bass to finding Casey Tominaga, his player development. We talk a lot about Matt Rule's player development on the show, but I think, I had questions even at the beginning of last season. Is he developing the players enough? Well, I think these last two groups have really shown some growth in that area.
And then, looking at it, I just wanted to mention the women's basketball team. They lost to Illinois yesterday, so they missed out on the double bye for the Big Ten tournament. So they'll be 5th place, but still in a really solid position to go to the NCAA tournament for Amy Williams' squad. And, Britt Prince coming in next year. She was part of a team, won her 4th state championship, in the vault this weekend. So she's used to winning championships in the vault and raising banners. So hopefully, she'll be doing that with the Huskers. And really, it's an exciting time for the women's basketball team too, and I can't tell you what an impact I think that Britt Prince is going to have on that program.
Absolutely, and you talk about a dynamic basketball player. Britt Prince is that fits that mold, and I'm excited to see what she brings to the table next season. I mean, I think you talk about building out a program. I think the women's basketball team is also getting to the point where they can have consistent runs of success and a form of stability, and stability in any sort of program is important. And as much as we talk about the men's team, I think the women's team, even though they lost yesterday, they still have to be extremely happy with where they're at.
Yeah, Natalie Potts, strong chance that she's going to be a Big Ten Freshman of the Year, at least one of them. She's won Freshman of the Week like 6 or 7 times. So I don't know. I don't know who the other teams have in the league. I can't say that I can speak intelligently about that, but I just know that with Natalie Potts, Logan Nisley, and some of these other up-and-comers, that it's going to be a fun time. I mean, literally next year in the vault, whether it's the men or the women, it's not going to be easy to beat Nebraska in Lincoln in a basketball game for the next few years. So that's going to be exciting.
Yeah, absolutely. It's truly a home court advantage, and I think one of the more underrated courts in the Big Ten. So I'm excited to see these next couple of years for both basketball programs, and they're on the upswing and they're on the rise. So you can't ask for much more than that.
Not a ton of football stuff going on this weekend. Just one thought that did come to mind. If you haven't checked out HuskerBigRed.com this weekend, because we had talked about this recently with a 5-star offer going out from the Huskers to David Sanders, the number 1 offensive tackle in the 2024 class, rated number 2 overall, or 2025 class, rated number 2 overall. Dylan Raiola, had tried to reach out to him, but that was unsuccessful. He basically put out a top 6 over the weekend, did not include Nebraska. Georgia, Clemson, South Carolina, Alabama were on the list. I don't remember the other 2, but and it's not that big of a deal. Nebraska still has some other, Andrew Babaloa's coming to campus. Jack Lange, I'm not quite sure how you pronounce that, but he's got an unofficial visit and an official visit set up, so I feel good about that. So there are some other targets on the board. I guess my thing with the whole David Sanders, I'm not sure why Nebraska waited so long to offer him. It just seems like they didn't give themselves a chance in that recruitment, really.
Well, I have Gregory Patrick also coming, and Patrick is a little bit more under the radar, but he is getting attention from Big Ten schools. He has 16 offers in total. Illinois, Indiana, Michigan State, Michigan, Minnesota, Penn State, and Purdue have all offered him, and I believe he's coming at the end of the month. I'm looking at my calendar here. I want to say the 23rd, if I'm not mistaken. I'm looking at, March 24th. Okay, so I mean, they are doing their homework on offensive linemen. Patrick is one that I'll certainly be watching. And again, it's a visit at the end of March. The end of March. Last year I think was important for Nebraska in terms of building the foundation, and I think Patrick, for example, is going to see his stock rise. So even though they may have lost out on Sanders, they're certainly still doing their homework on offensive linemen.
Yeah, and another offensive lineman that should see that we should mention. Malachi Goodman is a 6'5", 295-pound tackle out of Paramus, New Jersey. So he's taking a visit on April 6th, Saturday, April 6th. So that's another guy to mention. And Broderick Scholl out of Oklahoma, 6'5". He's actually ranked very highly. He's ranked 37th overall, according to the On3 ranking. So he's also going to be yeah. So he's also taking a visit. So I mean, they definitely have a lot of guys still on the board. Scrolling through, see if I see any other visits set up. But at that point, it's just with Sanders. I mean, even Michigan did a lot of recruiting with him, and they kind of got knocked out of it. I think Clemson is probably the favorite there, Georgia too. But you never know. Sometimes, I mean, Nebraska was out of it with Brandon Baker, and then he talked about making a visit, which he never actually did take. So hopefully this doesn't go like that does. But just because you don't make the top list doesn't necessarily mean that you are out of it. Although I do think that probably will be the end of the road for Nebraska, just because they've got other targets to pursue as well.
Yeah, and for what it's worth, Dylan Raiola committed to Georgia, and now here we are. But I think for Sanders, I think we might truly be out of it, just because, like you said, he has other offers and other targets, and we didn't make his top list. So, I mean, with previous coaching staffs, if we missed out on Sanders, we'd be scrambling to find other offensive lineman targets. But this staff, there's always a backup plan, like we've talked about, and so Nebraska is doing their homework at the position, and they're working hard to get some more. And so I'll be interested to see what the staff and Donovan Raiola does in terms of recruiting, because he's been on a hot streak over the last 7 or 8 months or so in terms of getting linemen. So I'm not too worried. It would have been nice to have Sanders, but I think we'll definitely pick up a lineman or two in this class when all is said and done.
Yeah, it's definitely not time to worry at all. In terms of the Brian Ferentz thing, there hasn't really been much traction at all. So I really don't see him being part of the staff. I don't see that being a calculation or really a possibility. There are no staff openings at this time anyway, except if he was going to be an off-field analyst. But he's a guy with a lot of NFL ties, and I think he'll probably end up back in the NFL. And if I was a college coach, if I was an assistant, being an NFL coach is a lot easier than being a college coach. You don't have to recruit. You don't have to deal with NIL. You don't have to deal with the transfer portal. You just get the guys that they tell you. You just basically work with the guys that you get. You do some pre-draft work right now, but if you're an assistant coach in the NFL, your job is not. I'm not saying easy, but it's a lot. You don't have to spend February, March, January, all year going to Texas and Florida and blah, blah, blah. You can sit at home with your family. You get the guys in the building. You work with those guys. You scout those guys. You actually coach football, which isn't, the amount of coaching that these guys actually do at the college level is, it's probably like a quarter of their job, and just all the other, stuff they have to deal with now. That goes with NIL and the portal and all that stuff.
Yeah, I mean, you look at the Green Bay Packers and your defensive coordinator, and I just smile because I love the fact that Jeff Hafley's no longer employed at Boston College. But Jeff Hafley left because recruiting and being a college coach is way more than just football now. And I think you're going to see more coaches leave, and people like to complain, it's ruining college football and this, that, and the other thing, but I mean, the NCAA, they established NIL, and they made it a thing, and now they can't control it. And just another thing that they've kind of created that they can't control, and that should be no surprise to anybody. But this is the way things are going to go now, and so it'll be interesting to see. It'll be interesting to see what happens with Brian Ferentz, because he was a pretty good tight ends coach up here in New England, and so I think, honestly, going back to the NFL probably wouldn't be the worst thing for him, because I do think he's a good coach. Maybe not a good offensive coordinator, but an assistant coach, absolutely. I mean, if he were to come here, I would take him in a heartbeat. So I mean, I'm sure he'll land on his feet somewhere, and to be out of the shadow of his father, I think is important for him as well.
Yeah, I mean, Iowa's turned out a lot of good NFL players, offensive linemen, tight ends, especially over the years. I mean, look at Sam Laporta last year. So they have turned out pro talent, and he's been part of that. So we'll see how it goes. Yeah, NIL will be interesting. There aren't, as of right now, there are no rules in NIL because the court said that you can't regulate it, which is exactly right. I mean, the NCAA is trying to go around acting like these people, aren't employees, but it's ridiculous. You can't, like you can't restrict movement like that. I mean, so the idea that the student athlete, that's done. These are
Yeah.
employees, and
Yep.
it's only going that way, going further down that road. So it's time for them to get their piece of the pie, and I'm all for it. But
The NCAA never cared about academics to begin with, and that may be a little bit,
no,
short-sighted to say, but let's be real here. They wanted the money.
that's all they've ever cared about is money.
Yeah.
So yeah, that's honestly, I think the NCAA is one of the worst organizations in this
Yeah.
country.
Yep.
100%. They do
100%.
not. They don't care about kids. I don't care. Yeah, I'm not saying everybody, but for the most part, the only thing they care about is how many people, how much money they can make off their March Madness tournament, and that's basically it.
And
And the
not
TV
even
money.
just Division One NCAA. Division One NCAA. It's Division Two and Division Three. Maybe not like March Madness. March Madness. Earnings in Division Two and Division Three. But even still, having been at a D3 school and been a part of a D3 football program, they're still a pain in the ass. I mean, they really are.
They are, yeah. So last thing I wanted to mention before we close out the show, the Cardiac Cornhuskers, the baseball team, pulled off another. They rallied on Thursday. They rallied on Saturday, scored 2 runs in the ninth yesterday, swept College of Charleston. And as of right now, according to the Walter Nolan live RPI ratings, Nebraska is third in the country, 7-3. So Will Bolt's team is off to a hot start this year. So if you haven't been following along, you might want to jump on the bandwagon because it looks like it might be a good season for the Nebraska baseball team.
Yeah, the pitching and the hitting are kind of working together to kind of play well. And I know those were comeback wins, but even still, the pitching was able to hold their own. And we were a little bit worried after the first series. I mean, we saw some blown leads at the beginning of the season, but now they seem to be in their groove, and the bats are on fire. So that's good. That's good to see, and I'm hoping they can continue it. And 7-3 in a year where Will Bolt has to win, he's got to be pretty happy right now.
Yeah, definitely. Off to a solid start. They need to get to the NCAA tournament. Just like Fred Hoiberg and company needed to, but they're actually taking care of business in non-conference, which really kind of doomed them last year. So
Yeah.
positive start there, and with that, we will wrap it up, you guys. So there'll be more coming this week. Obviously, I think we're getting out of the recruiting dead period, with college football recruiting. So, expect even more, kind of news on the recruiting front in the next few weeks. We'll have more basketball stuff. So please check out HuskerBigRed.com, and we'll be back for another episode on Monday. And as always, go Big Red.
Go Big Red.